Alright, so a few days ago, there's these alt-right protesters who ran up on stage at the Julius Caesar production in Shakespeare in the Park. This production is very demeaning as it's very clear that President Donald Trump is the one being assassinated. Take a look.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection. Check out the unbuttoned overcoat and red tie that hangs over his waist. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many.
Alright, so obviously I don't agree with this play, but it's quite interesting that if it were Obama, the media would cry out and this play would be immediately shut down. But anyways, people on the right also cried out and decided to protest, which is obviously not a smart thing to do. And here's some footage of some foolish protesters who are from the right running up on stage and disrupting the event themselves.
Liberty, freedom.
Stop the normalization of political violence against the right. This is unacceptable. You cannot.
Get off the stage.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause. We're going to pause. Security,
This is violence.
security, please.
You are all Goebbels! You are all Nazis like Joseph Goebbels! This is Goebbels! You are all Goebbels! You are inciting terrorists! The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands! The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands! Goebbels would be proud! Goebbels would be proud!
Come this way. Sir,
Goebbels
come
would be
this
proud!
way. Sir, grab your stuff.
Alright, so one of these protesters was later identified as Laura Loomer, who was the one that jumped up on stage and began shouting, "Stop the normalization of political violence against the right. This is violence against Donald Trump." So the basic concept of this play is that Julius Caesar has very much eagerness of himself and later assassinated by a large group of senators whose goal is to reinstate the public. Clearly, the assassination in the play is vile and hateful. It's not, however, linked to anyone advocating violence. Some may think that it is advocating violence by the clear look of Trump being the one assassinated, but it is not. This is also linked to the crazy old man named Bernie Sanders, who constantly shouts about distributing wealth and containing equality while closing on a second vacation home for $600,000, stated, quote, "You should be angry. Take your anger out on the right people." Then, of course, this crazy leftist went and shot many members of Congress at a baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia. These members were practicing for a charity softball game, and the shooter, who praised the lonely old man and hated Trump, decided to go on a rampage and shoot all these members of Congress. It was a domestic, politically motivated act of terrorism. Whose fault was it? Was it Bernie Sanders? Of course not. And of course, Bernie constantly says inflammatory things. But what he does not do is advocate violence. But what does advocate violence is when political rhetoric tells people to commit certain acts of violence. For example, radical Islamic jihadism. That literally advocates violence. What doesn't? Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Alright, but going back to the play. So of course, people, and by people, I mean Trump supporters, will of course run up on stage and cry for attention because of this play. As a rule, disrupting an event for the main purpose of not agreeing with what they believe to be as right is snowflake behavior. It doesn't matter if it's coming from the left, it doesn't matter if it's coming from the right. Then much of what these types of people will say for their justification is that they're attempting to prevent hate speech, and that somehow this hate speech that they're trying to prevent will generate violence. We've seen this with the left many times, attempting to stop conservative speeches at college campuses, but later commit treason, assault, arson, etc. Alright, later, Laura Ingraham tweeted, "The left doesn't like it when their tactics are used against their expression. How many would storm stage if Obama was stabbed?" Alright, so going to the idea if it was Obama. If anyone would storm the stage as well for Obama, the same rule would apply. It's idiocy for anyone to disrupt an event that participates in free speech and that does not advocate violence. You do not have a right to disrupt an event. What you do have a right is to boycott something in particular that you find distasteful. And by boycott, I mean boycott in a peaceful and an undisruptive manner. And by that, I mean the complete opposite of what Antifa does. Antifa is a group of 30-year-old men dressed up in these crappy ninja costumes who attempt to block out free speech, or hate speech as they see it, and later participate in punching anyone they disagree with. The complete opposite. Alright, so really what I find interesting about all of this is that free speech is now being exemplified as violence. And the notion that we can shut down people's speeches simply because we don't agree on what is being said is just absolutely ridiculous. It's practically the banishing of the First Amendment in practice, if not in law. Ideas and words should not be shattered down. You would sort of think that if there was a Venn diagram between the left and the right, and the very, very little space in the middle, you would assume that tolerance and free speech would be there, but clearly a lot of people disagree, which is it's honestly just quite sad. And the moral of this video is to convey the idea that free speech is in danger of extinction, and simply because of imbeciles such as these. If you're traumatized by words, you are in deep need of living in a bunker for at least the next 100 years, because you're just not going to make it. Not having the ability to apprehend words in an undisruptive manner, the best decision for you is to stay home. But if you think violence is the answer to stop words from spreading, you are simply a criminal.